Imagine an entire island turning red, not with sunsets or autumn leaves, but with millions of crabs marching relentlessly toward the ocean.
During the annual crab migration, all of Christmas Island is seeing red. On Christmas Island, this annual migration is one of nature's most breathtaking spectacles. A sea of red moving in perfect unison. But paradise is under siege. For decades, a tiny invader has been decimating these crabs, turning the island into a battlefield. The solution? Scientists released millions of ant killers, tiny warriors almost invisible to the naked eye. What happened next would stun the world, proving that sometimes the smallest creatures can decide the fate of an entire island. Paradise under siege. Christmas Island sits alone in the Indian Ocean, 217 miles south of Java, and 1,600 miles northwest of Perth, Australia. This Australian territory is essentially an underwater mountain towering 3 miles above the ocean floor. Only the top 1,180 foot poke above the surface, creating this isolated tropical paradise wrapped in rainforest. The island evolved its own world. Over millions of years, creatures developed here that exist nowhere else on Earth. At the heart of this ecosystem lives the red crab. These bright crimson crustaceans rule the forest floor. They dig burrows, eat fallen leaves, turn the soil, and keep the whole place running smoothly. For most of the year, these crabs live solitary lives in their underground homes. But when the wet season arrives between October and November, something magical happens. They emerge all at once. Males head to the coast first, digging mating burrows in the sand. Females follow days later, selecting the best males with the finest burrows. After mating, each female carries up to 100,000 eggs. During the last quarter moon, the females rush to the water's edge before dawn. They release their eggs into the ocean in a synchronized dance. The eggs hatch instantly upon touching seawater. Some crabs can lay 100,000 eggs at a time. The larvae spend about 4 weeks in the ocean before returning as tiny crabs, beginning their journey inland to the forest. Sir David Attenborough called this migration one of the most memorable moments from his entire career. The ground literally turns red, roads close, residents use leaf blowers and rakes to help the crabs cross safely. This spectacle drew tourists from around the world. But then everything changed. In the first half of the 20th century, yellow crazy ants arrived. Nobody knows exactly when or how, but they probably hitched a ride on supply ships. These ants came from Southeast Asia, though their true origin remains mysterious. On their home turf, natural predators keep them in check. However, on Christmas Island, nothing stopped them. The ants spread like wildfire. They formed super colonies covering hundreds of acres, housing billions of ants working as one massive organism. Underground ant cities stretched across the landscape. One colony alone covered 1,850 acres. Scientists could only estimate numbers by counting ants on the surface. One study found over 1,000 ants per square meter. When these super colonies met the red crabs, a massacre began. Yet, with so many attacking at one time, even a fully armored crab doesn't stand a chance. Since the late 1990s, the ant invaders have killed tens of millions of crabs. The question everyone asked was simple. Could anything stop them? The acid army. Yellow crazy ants earned their name from their erratic movements. Watch them for a minute and you'll see them dart around randomly, appearing frenzied. And don't let their size fool you. These tiny ants pack serious weapons. When threatened, they spray formic acid. This ranks among nature's most powerful acids. They aim for the eyes and leg joints of larger creatures, blinding them and rendering them immobile. Then the swarm moves in. A red crab wandering into ant territory faces certain death. With up to 1,000 ants per square meter near super colonies, escape becomes impossible. The acid attacks the crab's eyes first. With their vision gone, the crab loses their sense of direction. The acid eats into leg joints, paralyzing movement. Then, the ants swarm, tearing their victim apart piece by piece. The acid doesn't just kill individuals. It works as a toxic gas, suffocating everything nearby. A crab's burrow, once captured, becomes a nursery for antler larvae. Any crabs living nearby typically die within 24 hours from the lingering fumes. The death toll staggered scientists. Conservative estimates suggested 10 to 15 million red crabs had died from ant attacks. That's nearly a third of the island's entire crab population. The famous migration routes turned into death zones. Tourists expecting to see hundreds of crabs instead found torn bodies scattered across the forest floor. Rangers tried fighting back with poison bait. Starting in 2001, they used anto, which contains fipronil mixed into protein granules that ants find irresistible. This neurotoxin attacks the nervous systems of invertebrates. Park workers laid bait by hand, walking between massive supercolonies swarming with billions of ants. Helicopters dropped bait from the air 3 times to cover more ground. The approach worked temporarily. And numbers would drop in treated areas, but within a few years, they returned from the untreated parts of the island. New colonies sprang up. The cycle repeated endlessly. It cost money, required constant effort, and only provided short-term relief. Scientists needed a permanent solution. The scale of the problem was overwhelming. Park rangers and ecologists walked through areas once teeming with crabs only to find death and silence. The forest floor, once alive with the bright flashes of crimson, became a grey wasteland of leaves and lifeless bodies. Entire sections of rainforest were suffocating under the weight of unprocessed leaf litter. Without the crabs, seedlings grew unchecked, creating impenetrable thicket. Native birds struggled to find food and small reptiles disappeared under the acid-spraying ant hordes. The ecological clock was ticking, and with every passing year, the chance to save this unique ecosystem diminished. The human toll was also felt. Local communities relied on tourism driven by the migration spectacle, and the loss of crabs threatened both income and cultural pride. Scientists knew that conventional measures such as poison bait and manual removal were only temporary. They needed a long-term sustainable approach. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The future of Christmas Island's rainforest, its red crabs, and the delicate balance of an entire ecosystem hung in the balance. The key to defeating the ants lay in understanding their food source. These supercolonies couldn't survive without a constant supply of nutrients. And that nutrition came from an unexpected place. Another invasive species provided the ants with their primary fuel source. A tiny insect most people never noticed was secretly powering the entire ant invasion. Cut off that food supply and maybe, just maybe, the ants would collapse on their own. But finding that solution would require looking halfway around the world. The invisible partnership? Yellow laxcale insects. These tiny bugs don't look like much. They latch onto trees, sucking sap and secreting a sweet liquid called honeydew. That honeydew is pure carbohydrate fuel. For yellow crazy ants, it's everything. The relationship between ants and scale insects resembles farming. The ants protect their scale insects like livestock, driving away predators. In return, the scale insects produce endless supplies of honeydew. This symbiotic partnership helped both invasive species spread across Christmas Island at a frightening speed. Studies confirm the connection. When researchers cut ants off from scale insects, and activity on the ground dropped by 95% within just 4 weeks. Without their sugar supply, the ants couldn't maintain their massive colonies. They couldn't reproduce at the same rates and their supercolonies started to weaken. But the scale insects caused problems of their own. High population stressed trees severely. The insects drained sap like vampires, weakening even large trees until leaves start falling. On Christmas Island, season after season of this stress killed trees outright. The honeydew dripping onto branches encouraged mold growth. Mold covered leaves, blocking photosynthesis and resulting in more dead trees. Scientists realized something crucial. You couldn't just poison the ants forever. The scale insects would always be there ready to feed the next ant invasion. You had to break the cycle at its source. Control the scale insects and you control the ants. This principle forms the foundation of biological control. Every species in nature has natural enemies. Predators, parasites, and diseases that keep populations in check. When organisms become invasive in new territories, they leave those natural enemies behind. That's why they explode in numbers. The solution? Find the natural enemy and bring it to the invasion site. Restore the balance that nature intended. Researchers started searching for enemies of yellow lac-ale insects in Southeast Asia. Something had to keep them controlled in their homeland while they ran rampant on Christmas Island. The search led to Malaysia. Their scientists found their answer. A tiny wasp species that specifically targeted yellow lac-ale insects. This wasp kept scale population so low in Southeast Asia that the insects barely appeared in surveys. The wasps were that effective. Could this same wasp work on Christmas Island? Would it be safe to introduce another species? History showed plenty of biological control disasters. The research had to be thorough because if they released millions of ant killers, the consequences of getting it wrong could devastate the entire island. Enter the assassin. Scientists from LRO University in Melbourne led the search. After years of field research starting in 2009, they identified their target. Tachadi summer, a parasitic wasp from Malaysia measuring just 2 mm long, barely visible to the naked eye. This wasp is a specialist killer. It lays eggs inside adult female scale insects. The eggs hatch and the larvae feed on their host from the inside out, killing it. When the new wasps emerge, they immediately search for more scale insects to parasitize. The cycle repeats endlessly. A single wasp can lay up to 8 eggs in one female scale insect. Over its lifetime, one wasp can parasitize more than 150 scale insects. In Southeast Asia, this wasp works alongside other predators to keep yellow lac scale populations controlled in their native range. The wasp doesn't sting humans. It doesn't build nests. It doesn't harm native wildlife, plants, or crops. Many similar micro-wasps already lived on Christmas Island, going completely unnoticed by residents. This particular species had one focus: yellow lac scale insects. Scientists needed to verify this specificity. They conducted field tests in Malaysia, exposing 8 closely related scale insect species to the wasp. None were harmed. The wasp ignored them completely. This proved that no other scale insect population on Christmas Island faced risk. Researchers also tested whether the wasp would hunt scale insects even when yellow crazy ants acted as their bodyguards. The answer: absolutely. The wasps attacked regardless of ant presence. The Australian Government Department of Agriculture conducted extensive risk analysis, years of documentation, public comment periods, environmental assessments under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Scientists called this the most thoroughly researched biological control project in Australian history. By 2015, approvals came through. The Department of Agriculture granted permission to import and release the microbe on Christmas Island. Environmental authorities gave their blessing, everything checked out. In December 2016, a team flew to Malaysia. They collected 167 wasps, packaged them carefully in small vials inside a secure case. An officer from the Department of Agriculture chaperoned the entire journey to Christmas Island. The wasps survived the trip with near-perfect survival rates. Now came the hard part. They needed to breed these 167 wasps into millions. Only then could they release enough to make a real impact across the massive ant super colonies dominating the island. Breeding an army. Christmas Island National Park rangers built custom enclosures for breeding. Scientists from LRO University guided every step. They needed perfect conditions, the right temperature, humidity, and most importantly, plenty of yellow lac scale insects for the wasps to parasitize. The team planted specific vegetation that scale insects loved, and everything went to plan. They infected these plants with scale insects, creating ideal breeding grounds. The wasps laid eggs in the scale insects. New wasps emerged and the population grew. By 2017, they released the first wave. Park rangers and scientists released 8,000 wasps across for crazy ant habitats. Groundswell, blowholes, Margaret Knoll, and circuit tracks. Each location crawled with yellow crazy ants in their scale insect farms. The strategy split into two approaches. Half the wasps went directly to the front lines, released straight into active and super colonies where scale insects were most abundant. These wasps got to work immediately seeking out scale insects and laying eggs. The other half entered training camps. Scientists kept them in breeding enclosures with infected plants, allowing populations to build even higher before release. This ensured a steady supply of wasps to maintain pressure on scale insect populations. Releases started small. Scientists wanted to monitor how well the wasps adapted to their new environment. Would they survive? Would they actually reduce the number of scale insects? Would those reductions impact the ants? Monitoring stations went up across the island. Teams counted ants per square meter. They tracked scale insect populations. They watched for any unexpected consequences. Every bit of data mattered. The wasp releases continued gradually over a few months. Thousands of wasps spread across the affected areas. The goal was complete coverage of every major and super colony. Now came the waiting game. Biological control doesn't work overnight. The wasps needed time to establish populations, find scale insects, and begin reducing their numbers. Only then wouldn't colonies feel the effects. Months passed. Then years. Scientists kept monitoring. And slowly something remarkable began to happen across Christmas Island. The shocking results. For about 2 years after the wasp releases, monitoring teams tracked ant populations across different parts of the island. The data started showing encouraging patterns. In some areas, ant numbers collapsed dramatically. One survey location that once swarmed with 700 ants found only 10 remaining. Red crabs began digging mating burrows in places where massive underground and cities once thrived. But scientists stayed cautious. They needed consistent results across multiple locations before declaring success. One good result might be a coincidence. Multiple locations showing similar patterns meant that the wasps were working. Scale insect populations dropped significantly, and without their honeydew supply, ant super colonies couldn't maintain their massive sizes. Colony growth slowed. Reproduction rates decreased. The ants didn't disappear overnight, but their stranglehold on the island began to loosen. The real proof came during the red crab migration season in 2017 when the wasps first arrived. About 40 to 50 million adult crabs made the annual journey to the ocean. That number had been relatively stable for years, showing the slow recovery from poison baiting programs. But by 2024, something incredible happened. The migration swelled to 100 million crabs. The population had more than doubled. Scientists credited multiple factors. The poison baiting programs had initially helped stabilize populations, but the wasp biocontrol seemed to accelerate recovery dramatically. Areas where wasps reduced ant numbers showed the strongest rebounds in crab populations. Park rangers reported that the annual migration grew more spectacular each year. Crabs dug burrows in territories they hadn't accessed in decades. Forest floors swarmed with red crabs processing leaf litter like they had before the ant invasion. The ecosystem showed clear signs of recovery. The wasps deserved thanks. These tiny creatures, barely visible to human eyes, were winning a war against one of the world's worst invasive species. They saved an entire ecosystem without anyone noticing them working. However, the job remained unfinished. Yellow crazy ants still inhabited large portions of the island. Remote areas where wasps hadn't reached yet still swarmed with ant super colonies. Some locations needed additional wasp releases. Others required continued poison baiting to keep pressure on the ants. Scientists emphasized that Christmas Island would never be completely free of yellow crazy ants. The island's size and terrain made total eradication nearly impossible. But control that was achievable. Keep ant numbers manageable and the ecosystem could thrive. The success raised another question. If wasps saved Christmas Island's crabs, what about the rest of the ecosystem? How far did the benefits reach? More than crabs. Red crabs do more than look spectacular during migration. They're ecosystem engineers. These crustaceans maintain the health of Christmas Island's entire rainforest. They consume tons of fallen leaves every year. Leaf litter that would otherwise pile up gets processed by millions of crab mouths. This keeps the forest floor clean, maintaining proper humidity and temperature levels. Nutrients return to the soil through crab droppings, fertilizing new plant growth. Crabs eat certain seedlings, thinning out dense undergrowth. This prevents forests from becoming choked with vegetation. Light reaches the forest floor. Air circulates properly. The forest breathes. When the ant supercolonies killed the red crabs, forests suffocated. Leaves piled up everywhere. Dense seedling growth created impenetrable undergrowth. The forests looked green and lush, but that was misleading. The forest was dying slowly, choked by its own excess growth. Scientists noticed something disturbing in ant-dominated areas. Plant diversity declined. Fewer species grew successfully. The beautiful, healthy forest that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years was transforming into something unrecognizable. Other invasive species moved in. Giant African snails, another non-native pest, thrived in the thick undergrowth. Without crabs controlling vegetation, these snails found a perfect habitat. The problems compounded as wasps reduced ant numbers and crab populations recovered. Forests began to heal. Leaf litter disappeared at normal rates again. Seedling density dropped back to healthy levels. Plant diversity increased. The snail populations declined as their preferred habitat vanished. The benefits extended beyond plants. Lizards, frogs, small mammals, and birds all suffered under the ant occupation. The ants sprayed formic acid at everything, killing baby turtles, bird chicks, and anything small enough to overwhelm. When ant numbers dropped, these species began recovering, too. Horticulture improved on the island. The yellow lax-scale insects attacked fruit trees and other crops, with wasps controlling scale populations. Gardeners reported healthier plants and better harvests, an unexpected side benefit of the BioCrawl program. Christmas Island began resembling its old self again. The complex web of relationships between species started functioning properly. Every creature found its home again. The forest ecosystem that had taken millions of years to evolve was being restored by creatures too small to see without a close look. The long fight. Christmas Island will never see the total eradication of the yellow crazy ants. The terrain makes it impossible. Dense rainforest covers the island. Steep cliffs, deep valleys, and remote areas remain largely inaccessible. Ants hide in these places, safe from both poison bait and wasps. But total eradication was never the goal. Control is the target. Keep ant populations manageable so native species can thrive. And the wasps have proven that this approach works. Scientists continue refining their methods. In 2021, they announced plans to introduce another wasp species from Africa. This one targets the ants more directly, but it requires extensive research first. The African wasp is considered a pest in Australian agriculture. Introducing it carries risks that need thorough evaluation. Additional BioCrawl options remain under investigation. The battle requires multiple tools working together. Wasps to control scale insects, poison bait for direct ant control, and possibly new biological agents in the future. The approach demands constant vigilance. Park rangers monitor ant populations year-round. When numbers spike in certain areas, they respond quickly with targeted interventions. It's ongoing work that will likely continue indefinitely. The investment pays off. Red crab populations prove that. From 45 to 50 million in 2015 to over 100 million now. That's not just recovery. That's a thriving population exceeding previous estimates. The 2024 migration season was extraordinary. After a dry 2023 that delayed spawning by months, the crabs returned to their normal schedule. In late November, 100 million crabs spawned at the coast. Roads closed. Bridges and tunnels protected the crabs. Leaf blowers and rakes helped clear paths. Tourism revenue increased. The migration brings visitors from around the world. Hotels book up a year in advance. The spectacle that Sir David Attenborough praised had returned to its full glory. Federal Environment Minister Tanya Pliers called it a fantastic success story showing how working together protects precious native species. Park rangers, scientists, volunteers, and the local community all contributed. The lesson extends beyond Christmas Island. Invasive species threaten ecosystems worldwide. Traditional methods like poison offer temporary fixes at best. However, when thoroughly researched and carefully implemented, biological control can provide long-term solutions. It's not perfect. It's not instantaneous, but it works. Tiny wasps fighting scale insects that feed massive and super colonies. It sounds almost too simple. Yet, millions of red crabs crawling across an island prove the approach succeeds.